The distress beacon cut through subspace like a scream in the dark. On the bridge of the Coalition carrier, Valiant Hope, Commander Thelanara watched the distortion ripples with 3 of her 4 eyes, while the 4th monitored casualty reports. 17 colonies burning, 4 billion souls evacuated or dead. The Krell Swarm had broken through every defense line, and now her people, the gentle Aethery, the scholarly Chin, the peaceful Velfast extinction. Response incoming, her communications officer chittered, mandibles clicking nervously. But, Commander, it's not the Taraxian fleet. It's not anyone in our database. The ship that emerged from the fold point was wrong. Too angular, too dark, covered in what looked like ablative scars and weapons ports that had no business existing on a rescue vessel. It didn't broadcast friendly recognition codes. It simply ... waited, hanging in the black like a predator that had just caught an interesting scent. Thelanara's skin shifted from diplomatic blue to alarmed violet. Hail them. Demand identification. The response came in a language that made her translator glitch twice before finding purchase. This is Terra, response vessel, Endurance. We received your distress call. We are en route to your position. A pause. We are the children you've been warned about. In the war room, panic spread like poison. Admiral Voshtar, a Chin whose family could trace their lineage back 8,000 years of unbroken peace, pulled up ancient files, the kind stored in encrypted vaults and marked with 17 different hazard symbols. Impossible, he whispered, his feathers lying flat against his skull in primal fear. Earth was quarantined. The accord of the burning cradle. We sealed them away 3 centuries ago. Why? Thelanara demanded, though part of her already knew. The stories existed in every culture's nightmare repository. A world so hostile that evolution had created apex predators as the baseline fauna, gravity that crushed ethery bones, an atmosphere that was basically controlled poison, inhabitants who had mastered warfare before they'd mastered metallurgy. And when the galaxy had made first contact, those inhabitants, humans, had looked at the peaceful coalition and asked only one question: what do you need killed? The accord had been unanimous: quarantine them, pay them to stay home. Let that death world fade into myth. Because Vashta said, pulling up a 300-year-old image of a human soldier, they frightened us more than any enemy ever could. The Endurance didn't ask for docking permission. It simply deployed dropships that fell through the atmosphere of Refuge Station like stones, their heat shields glowing red-white against the night. Coalition soldiers, already exhausted from holding the line against the Krell, watched the ships land with weapons half-raised, unsure whether to feel relief or terror. The ramps lowered. What emerged made Thelanara's blood run cold. Children. The oldest might have been 16 in Earth years. The youngest looked barely into their 2nd decade. They wore armor that seemed to absorb light, moved with an economy of motion that suggested every calorie was calculated, every gesture measured. Their eyes, those distinctly human forward-facing predator eyes, swept the battlefield with the kind of calm assessment Thelanara had only seen in career soldiers with 50 years of combat experience. One of them, a boy with skin the color of deep earth and close-cropped hair, walked directly through a radiation zone that had been deemed uninhabitable for the next 2 decades. His suit didn't even register strain. He stopped at a collapsed bunker, examined the twisted metal, then simply reached down and tore the reinforced blast door away like it was paper. Inside, 3 Vel soldiers stared up at him in shock. "You're safe now," he said quietly, his voice carrying none of the triumph or pride Thelanara expected, just statement of fact. Then he moved on. Across the battlefield, a girl no older than 14 stood in the crater of a kinetic strike, staring at the Krell bodies scattered around like broken toys. She picked up a weapon, something that should have required a 3-person crew to operate, and slung it over her shoulder as if it weighed nothing. Her partner, a pale boy with burn scars crossing half his face, was carefully moving through the wreckage, checking each coalition soldier for vitals, with hands that shook slightly from some injury Thelanara's med scanner couldn't identify. "What are they?" her tactical officer whispered. Thelanara pulled up the files Voshtar had sent. The truth emerged in fragments, each one worse than the last. After the accord, Earth hadn't simply accepted quarantine. They'd prepared decades of genetic modification, psychological conditioning, combat training that began before children could walk. They'd looked at their own Deathworld nature and asked a different question: what if we made ourselves into exactly what the galaxy feared, the children of the Deathworld? born in orbital stations where gravity could be adjusted to crushing weights, raised in atmospheres that would kill baseline humans, trained in empathy suppression so they could make impossible decisions without hesitation, engineered to survive radiation, toxins, vacuum, pressure, heat, cold, everything that had made Earth a planet of nightmares. But the files also contained something else. The original treaty, the promise humanity had made before the Accord sealed them away. If you call, we will answer. No matter how much you fear us, no matter how much you hate what we've become. They had waited 300 years to fulfill that promise. The defense of Refuge Station lasted 18 hours. The Krell Swarm, which had broken 7 coalition fleets, met the human children in close combat. What followed wasn't a battle, it was education. Thelanara watched from the command center as a squad of 6 humans, none older than 13, moved through a Krell assault wave, like scalpels through flesh. They didn't waste movement, didn't showboat, didn't even seem angry. They simply executed their task with the precision of machines and the adaptability of apex predators. A Krell warrior 3 meters of armored chitin and rage-charged one of the girls. She sidestepped, grabbed its primary arm, and used its own momentum to send it crashing into its squadmates. Before they could recover, her team had already moved to the next objective. No shots wasted, no energy expended unnecessarily, just brutal, calculated efficiency. Coalition soldiers who had been fighting desperately for days found themselves protected by children who moved through withering fire as if it were rain. One Ithri medic, pinned down by a Krell heavy weapon, watched as a human boy sprinted directly into the line of fire, his armor taking hits that should have killed him 3 times over, then simply picked her up and carried her to safety before returning to eliminate the weapon emplacement. "Why?" she asked him later, her voice shaking. "Why would you risk that?" He looked at her with those predator eyes, and for a moment she saw something ancient and tired lurking behind them. "It's what we do," he said simply. "It's what we were made for." Commander Reshkol couldn't accept it. A career officer from the Chin military caste, he'd spent 40 years maintaining the coalition's peaceful expansion. The idea that these walking weapons wrapped in child skin could be their salvation was an obscenity. He'd read the classified files. He knew what humanity had done to itself in the name of survival, the psychological conditioning, the genetic modifications that bordered on speciation, the training programs that produced a 98% casualty rate and considered it acceptable losses. They weren't children. They were monsters wearing children's faces. In the secure command bunker, he gathered 12 officers who shared his fear. "The Krell will fall back," he told them, his crest flushed with conviction. "They always do after a major defeat. And when they do, we'll have a worse problem, an army of human Deathworlders, with no enemy to point them at. Do you think they'll just leave? Do you think they'll go back to their quarantine peacefully?" He pulled up schematics of the human camp. "We have a weapon, a viral kill switch, designed during the first contact era in case humans ever posed a threat. It targets their modified genetics specifically. We deploy it now, while they're concentrated, while they think we trust them. That's genocide." Thelanara's voice cut through the room like ice. She'd been listening from the doorway, her skin patterned dark with fury. "They came when we called. They're dying to protect us. They're dying because dying is what they were built to do." Reshkol shot back. "Look at them, Commander. They don't feel fear. They barely feel pain. They're not saving us, they're following programming. And when the enemy is gone, what happens when their programming decides we're the next threat?" Thelanara thought of the girl she'd seen that morning, sitting with a Vel child, teaching her how to tie her boots with hands that had killed 40 Krell warriors the night before. The gentleness in those engineered fingers, the soft smile on a face that could switch to cold calculation in a heartbeat. "You're wrong," she said, but her words felt hollow even to herself. The kill switch was deployed in the human camp during the night cycle, distributed through water rations. Reshkol watched from the command center, his conscience clear. It was necessary. It was survival. The galaxy couldn't afford to let Earth's children roam free. For 6 hours, nothing happened. Then the reports started coming in. The humans knew. They'd known from the moment the pathogen entered their systems. Their modified immune responses had flagged it, analyzed it, and begun producing countermeasures before it could spread to critical organs. But they didn't raise alarms, didn't call for help. They simply continued their mission, continued protecting the coalition soldiers who had just tried to kill them. When Thelanara confronted the leader of the human response team, girl barely 15, with eyes older than most civilizations, the child simply nodded. "We know what you did," she said calmly. "Commander Reshkol deployed a genetic weapon against us approximately 7 hours ago." "Then why?" "Because you called for help," the girl interrupted. "Because the Krell are still out there. Because there are civilians who need protection." She paused, and something almost like sadness crossed her face. "Because whether you trust us or not, whether you try to kill us or not, you're still sentient beings worth protecting. That's the programming you're so afraid of." The final Krell assault came at dawn, a desperate last push, with everything they had left. The coalition forces were exhausted, depleted, falling back to their final defensive positions. The human children stepped forward, not with glory or pride or anger, just duty. They met the Krell at the breach points and held them as the pathogen still working through their systems caused internal hemorrhaging. Held them as their engineered bodies began failing from the inside out. Held them until the Krell broke and ran, their swarm scattered, their offensive crushed. When it was over, 37 human children lay dead. Another 63 were in critical condition. They'd won the battle while being murdered by the people they were protecting. And not one of them had complained. Not one had stopped fighting. Reshkol was arrested quietly, his career and honor destroyed. But in the command center, watching the human medics treat their dying team members with the same efficient calm they'd shown in combat, Thelanara wondered if he'd been wrong or right. These children had saved them. These children were also exactly what Earth had been quarantined for creating. On the last night before the human ship departed, Thelanara found the girl with the old eyes sitting alone on the observation deck. Watching Refuge Station's sun rise over a battlefield, they'd transformed from a graveyard into hallowed ground. "What do you call yourselves?" Thelanara asked quietly. "Not children of the death world. What do humans call you?" The girl was silent for a long moment. "We don't have a name," she finally said. "Names are for people who get to choose what they become. We're what you needed us to be. What Earth made itself into because you were too afraid to do it yourselves. We didn't ask you to." "Yes, you did." The girl's voice was soft but carried absolute certainty. 300 years ago, when you decided your peace was more important than our freedom, when you sealed us away and told us the only way we could ever be part of the galaxy was as its weapons, we answered that call. We became what you needed." She turned to face Thelanara fully, and in those predator eyes was a weight of sorrow that no child should carry. "We answered your distress signal. We saved your people. We died protecting you. And you tried to exterminate us for being exactly what you made us." The Endurance left without ceremony 12 hours later. New parades, new medals, no thanks officially given. The coalition leadership quietly scrubbed most records of what happened at Refuge Station, filed vague reports about unexpected reinforcements, and activated old protocols to strengthen the quarantine around Earth. But in the barracks and medical stations and civilian shelters, the coalition soldiers who'd fought alongside the human children spread different stories. Of a girl who'd held a collapsed ceiling on her shoulders for an hour so medics could evacuate wounded. Of a boy who'd talked down a terrified Vel soldier from panic while simultaneously coordinating artillery strikes. Of children who'd moved with the precision of machines but stopped to check on injured civilians with a gentleness that seemed impossible. Thelanara added her own report to the classified files. Not the sanitized version for the Coalition Council, but the truth. "They came when we called. They are what we fear most: power without hesitation, strength without mercy, children raised as weapons, but they are also what we could never be willing to die for: people who hate them, willing to protect the hand that poisons them. If we ever call for help again, they will answer." That is not a comfort, that is a warning. Because if we need them again, it means we've failed so badly that only monsters can save us. And we will have no right to judge them for being the monsters we created. The last image she recorded was from the observation satellite, the Endurance pausing at the system's edge, hanging in the dark between stars. For a moment it just waited there, as if looking back. Then it folded away, returning to the quarantine zone humanity had turned into a fortress. Returning to Earth, that death world where children were forged into shields for a galaxy that feared them too much to let them be anything else. The distress beacon stopped transmitting. Refuge Station began the long process of rebuilding, and in the classified vaults of every coalition species, new files were added to the old warnings. "They will answer if you call, but pray you never need to."